Have you ever wished you could walk through chaos without being shaken? What if the next time someone insulted you, challenged you, doubted you, you didn't flinch? What if the anger never rose? What if the need to prove, to defend, to react simply vanished? Because there's a way, not fantasy, not numbness, but real, practiced emotional power. In this video, you're going to learn 9 timeless Stoic lessons crafted not just to make you think, but to transform how you move through the world. You'll discover why your peace doesn't belong in anyone else's hands, why silence is sometimes your strongest weapon, and why, if you truly want to grow, you must learn to turn criticism into fuel. And don't skip part 8 seriously. That's where we take the pain we usually run from and turn it into power. Criticism, ego, emotional pain, what most people fear. Stoicism teaches us to reframe and rise above. So, stick with me to the very end. This isn't just another motivational video. This is a toolkit, a mental shift for anyone tired of being pushed around by life and other people's moods. And if this speaks to you, if you're ready to stop reacting and start leading your inner life with strength, hit that subscribe button and join us here at The Silent Thinker. This is where calm becomes a superpower. Now take a breath. Let's begin. Part 1. The power of choice in emotional control. Have you ever noticed how one careless word, one rude glance, one unexpected delay can derail your entire day? You wake up feeling fine, maybe even grateful, ready to tackle your schedule with focus. But then someone cuts you off in traffic. Your coworker brushes off your idea in a meeting, or a loved one forgets something that mattered to you, and just like that, the peace is gone. It's almost like the world has this uncanny ability to reach inside of you and press all the wrong buttons. But what if I told you the real power isn't in their hands, it's in yours? You see, most people go through life believing they're at the mercy of what happens to them. They react, they fume, they complain, and in doing so, they quietly surrender their freedom. What Stoicism teaches, what I've come to understand through years of study and personal trial, is that you are never a victim of someone else's behavior. You're only ever a participant in your own reaction. Picture this. You're walking through a peaceful park, sipping your coffee. The world feels still. Then someone bumps into you without apology. In that moment, you have a choice. You can give away your peace and get angry, or you can pause and remind yourself that their actions don't have to dictate your state of mind. That brief pause between the stimulus and your response is where your power lives. And the longer you practice that pause, the stronger it gets. It's like wearing noise-canceling headphones in a loud city. The traffic, the honking, the shouting, it's all still there, but it no longer invades your inner space. You become the curator of your emotional environment. And that's what true emotional freedom looks like. Let me give you a real example. I once had a colleague who would constantly interrupt me during team meetings. At first, I was furious. I'd leave those meetings feeling invisible, dismissed, disrespected. I'd replay his words in my head, stewing over them. But one day, I decided to stop giving him that power. I took a breath, stepped back mentally, and asked myself, what if this isn't about me? What if he's just anxious or unaware or insecure? That shift didn't change him, but it changed everything for me. I walked out of that room with my peace intact, and I've never given it up so easily since. You might be thinking, sure, that sounds noble, but in the heat of the moment, how do I stop myself from reacting? That's where daily mental training comes in. Start with this. The next time you feel triggered, just name the feeling. Say to yourself, I'm feeling irritated, or I feel dismissed. Don't judge it, just name it. Then ask yourself why. What expectation was violated? Was I hoping they'd show respect? Was I needing to feel heard? Once you understand the trigger, you can choose your response based on your deeper values, not your fleeting emotions. And here's something few people realize. The anger you carry is usually not about what happened. It's about what you expected. You expected the barista to be polite. You expected your partner to remember that important date. You expected your boss to recognize your hard work. And when they didn't, you felt hurt, disrespected, or overlooked. But were they really wrong? Or were your expectations unspoken, unagreed upon, and silently absolute? Expectations are emotional contracts we sign with people without their consent, and then we suffer when they don't honor a deal they didn't even know they made. I've seen this in my own life more times than I can count. A friend who didn't call back, a family member who made a thoughtless remark, and I'd spiral until I learned to let go, not of standards or self-respect, but of the illusion that people are here to live up to my internal rule book. They're not. They're walking their own path, shaped by their own wounds, fears, and filters. The sooner we accept this, the freer we become. Now, this doesn't mean tolerating everything. It means recognizing that your peace is too precious to place in someone else's hands. The Stoics believed that external events don't disturb us. Our judgments about them do. When someone acts rudely, it's not their behavior that disturbs you. It's your belief that they shouldn't be rude. You think, I wouldn't do that, so they shouldn't either. But they're not you. And holding everyone to your internal standards is like yelling at the wind for blowing. It's exhausting and futile. So here's something I do every night that you might find helpful. I call it the reframe ritual. Before bed, I write down 3 moments from the day that triggered me. Then I ask, what was I expecting? And I rewrite that expectation into a statement of acceptance. For example, I expected my coworker to be considerate. Becomes, sometimes people are wrapped up in their own stress. And that's okay. It doesn't mean I agree with bad behavior. It means I won't tie my emotional well-being to something I can't control. The more I practiced this, the more I noticed something beautiful. The world stopped feeling so personal. Strangers became just people, doing what they do. Co-workers became humans with their own inner chaos. And I became the calm in the storm. Not because life stopped being messy, but because I stopped needing it to be perfect to feel okay. you'll feel the shift too. One day you'll notice that what used to make you angry now barely makes a ripple. You'll still care, but not in a way that costs you your peace. You'll be aware, but not emotionally enslaved. And that, my friend, is the essence of Stoic living, not apathy, but awareness, not indifference, but discipline. So the next time someone tries to push your buttons, just smile internally. Remind yourself that their behavior belongs to them. Your response belongs to you, and the space between is where your strength lives. The world may still throw chaos your way, but you no longer have to let it inside, because you've made a different choice. You've chosen peace. You've chosen freedom. You've chosen the power of not reacting, and in that choice, you become unshakable. Part 2. Letting go of being right and reclaiming inner peace. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you got into an argument? Not a fist-pounding, table-flipping fight, but one of those subtle battles where you felt the urge rising inside to prove that you were right. Maybe it was with your partner about who misremembered a date, or a co-worker about how to do something the right way, or maybe it was with a family member who just couldn't see things from your side. You felt yourself tense up. The voice inside you screamed, "They don't get it. I have to make them understand." And in that moment, whether you realized it or not, you gave up your peace for your pride. We've all been there. I've been there more times than I care to admit. And each time, it left me with the same bitter aftertaste of victory that didn't feel like a win. Because the truth is, even when you're right, if you have to sacrifice your inner calm to prove it, you've lost something more valuable than any argument. Stoicism offers a powerful lens here. It asks a simple but piercing question. Would you rather be right, or would you rather be at peace? And for most of us, we've spent years choosing right. We arm ourselves with facts, opinions, sharp comebacks. We collect receipts. We rehearse what we'll say next time. But at what cost? We drain ourselves. We damage relationships. We turn our dinner tables and workspaces into battlegrounds, all because the ego is starving for validation. But what if we stopped feeding that hunger? What if we stopped needing to win every conversation? Let me share a story that changed the way I see this. A few years ago, I was talking with a close friend, someone I deeply respect, about a political issue. We were on opposite sides. The conversation started civil, but within minutes, it took a turn. You know the feeling, voices rising, interruptions, that edge in your chest where you feel like your identity is on trial. And I remember this distinct moment where I felt the urge to go all in to crush the debate with data, logic, and fire. But instead, I paused, and I simply said, I see where you're coming from. I still disagree, but I respect that this means a lot to you. And just like that, the tension dissolved. Not because we agreed, but because I stopped needing to win. That moment taught me something. Most people aren't looking for agreement. They're looking to feel heard. And when you give them that, not sarcastically, not passively, but with genuine presence, you give them something more powerful than victory. You give them dignity, and you give yourself peace. Stoicism isn't about backing down. It's about choosing wisely. Not every hill's worth dying on. Not every disagreement needs to be turned into a courtroom drama. The wise person, the truly free person, knows when to speak and when to stay silent. Think about all the energy you've spent in your life trying to change people's minds. Now ask yourself, how often did it work? And more importantly, how often did it leave you feeling better? Here's the thing. The need to be right often masks something deeper: insecurity. When we feel unsure of ourselves, we grasp for certainty in argument. We cling to being right because being wrong feels like a threat to our identity. But being wrong doesn't mean we're worthless. It means we're growing. It means we're open. It means we're human. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid, harsh words on the surface, but liberating underneath. Because the moment you no longer need to prove yourself, you're free. Free from the need for applause. Free from the need to defend your every thought. Free from the exhausting cycle of always needing the last word." Let's bring this down to something practical. Next time you feel the urge to argue, try this. Pause. Take a deep breath. Ask yourself, is this truly worth my energy? Will winning this argument improve my life in a meaningful way? If the answer is no, let it go. And if you're unsure, try responding with curiosity instead of correction. Say, "That's interesting. Can you tell me more about why you feel that way?" You'd be amazed how often people soften, not because they were corrected, but because they were heard. There's a kind of quiet power in not needing to correct everyone. In not needing to have the final say. It doesn't mean you don't care about truth. It means you've prioritized your peace over your pride. And here's something else that's easy to forget. No one wins an argument where both people walk away feeling small. But when you respond with humility, with stillness, with respect, you walk away with your soul intact. I remember watching my grandfather once during a heated family debate. Everyone was fired up, talking over each other, but he just sat back in his chair, listened, nodded, and at one point said, "You all may be right, but I'd rather spend this evening enjoying your company." And just like that, the room shifted. Tension became laughter. Combat turned to connection. That wasn't weakness. That was wisdom. We need more of that today. In a world constantly shouting for attention, the calm person is magnetic. The person who doesn't need to fight for every inch becomes the one others look to when things fall apart. So, if you want to master your emotions, don't just learn when to speak, learn when to stay silent. Don't just gather arguments, gather grace. Don't just fight to be right, fight to be still. Because at the end of the day, no one's handing out trophies for winning the most arguments. But peace, that's a reward that lasts. And when you learn to let go of the need to be right, you discover the deeper truth. That real strength doesn't come from being loud. It comes from knowing you don't need to be. Part 3, Unshakable. Worth. How to stop letting others define you. Let me ask you something that's a little uncomfortable. How much of your life have you spent adjusting yourself to fit other people's opinions? Think about it. You've probably held your tongue so you wouldn't seem too harsh. You've dressed a certain way because you didn't want to be judged. Maybe you've even stayed silent when someone disrespected you just to avoid conflict. And why? Because deep down, we've all been taught to believe that how others see us determines our worth. But here's the Stoic truth. Your worth isn't up for debate. Not on social media, not in the workplace, not in your family, and certainly not in the minds of people who haven't walked a mile in your shoes. Still, it's hard, isn't it? Let me tell you about a moment that hit me like a brick wall. I was giving a presentation, something I'd worked on for weeks. I knew the material, I believed in it, and when I stood up to speak, I was confident. But during the Q&A, someone in the audience, a respected colleague, made a cutting remark. Not constructive, not curious, just dismissive. The room went quiet. I smiled, kept my composure, and finished the talk. But the moment I walked off stage, my mind spiraled. What did they mean? Was I not clear enough? Did everyone agree with them? Did I sound stupid? That single comment hijacked my entire evening. And the worst part, I handed them that power. I let one voice outweigh my own inner knowing. It was later that night, sitting in silence, that I remembered something Marcus Aurelius once wrote. It never ceases to amaze me we all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinions than our own. That's the insanity we live in. We trust strangers more than we trust our own hearts. We let someone's careless words determine our value as if they have access to our soul, our story, our struggle. But the Stoic path teaches us something liberating. People's opinions are reflections of them, not you. Their judgments are colored by their own insecurities, fears, and biases. What they see when they look at you says more about their lens than your truth. Now, this doesn't mean we ignore feedback. Wisdom welcomes growth. If someone offers insight that helps us improve, we should take it. But not all criticism is helpful. Some of it is noise. Some of it is poison. Some of it is projection. And we've got to learn to filter. Think about social media. One cruel comment can sit in your chest for days, while 100 kind words vanish in seconds. That's not because the insult was true. It's because your brain has been conditioned to focus on the threat. But your soul knows better. Here's a story I'll never forget. A young woman I mentored was preparing for a big job interview. She had the credentials, the passion, the experience. But what she didn't have was self-belief. Why? Because years ago, a teacher told her she wasn't leadership material. And that sentence stuck. It shaped how she saw herself. It followed her like a shadow, even as she accomplished great things. I asked her, what if that teacher was wrong? She paused and said, I've never considered that. That's how deep these wounds go. One opinion, one moment can rewrite our story unless we take the pen back. So how do we do that? How do we detach from the grip of other people's judgments? It starts with awareness. When someone says something hurtful, pause. Ask yourself, does this comment align with who I know myself to be? Or is it simply a reflection of their own limited view? Then return to your core, your values, your truth, the work you've done, the resilience you've built. Anchor yourself in what's real, not what's reactive. You are not someone's label. You are not someone's mistake or rumor or assumption. You are the product of everything you've survived, learned, and chosen to become. And that cannot be touched by a passing comment. Now, I know this is easier said than done. We all want to be liked. We all want to be understood. But the deeper calling isn't to be approved of. It's to be authentic. Authenticity means you show up as yourself, even when it's misunderstood, even when it's not clapped for, even when it's judged. Because in time, the world adjusts to your truth or it moves on. Either way, you stay centered. Let me share a small exercise I use when criticism stings. When you feel wounded by someone's words, write down what they said. Then, below it, write 3 reasons why it doesn't define you. Remind yourself of your actions, your efforts, your integrity. It's not just a mental exercise, it's a reclamation of identity, because no one gets to write your story but you. There's a saying I heard once that stuck with me. If you live for their applause, you'll die by their silence. The Stoic flips that script. We live for alignment, not approval. We seek truth, not applause. We answer to our conscience, not the crowd. So the next time someone tries to reduce you to a label, a category, or a one-liner, pause, breathe, and remember who you are, not what they say you are. And if you ever forget, come back to this. You are not here to be understood by everyone. You are here to live in alignment with what's true for you. And when you do that, the opinions of others begin to shrink. The insults lose their teeth, and your inner peace becomes your compass, not their approval. That's the freedom Stoicism offers. And once you taste it, you'll never trade it again. Part 4. Boundaries. Our strength protecting your energy is self-respect. There's a moment in everyone's life when they realize they've been giving too much time, too much energy, too much of themselves to people, problems, and obligations that never deserved that kind of access. Maybe you've felt it too. That quiet resentment when someone asks for another favor, assuming you'll say yes. That drained feeling after a phone call that was more about their problems than your presence. That silent frustration when you cancel your own plans again just to help someone who wouldn't do the same for you. You might have told yourself it's kindness, that it's love, that it's what a good person does. But here's the Stoic truth. Kindness without boundaries isn't virtue, it's self-betrayal. And no philosophy is more direct about this than Stoicism. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who ruled with clarity and chaos, once wrote, "Do not waste what remains of your life in speculating about others, unless it is for some mutual benefit." In other words, protect your energy like it's gold, because it is. You don't owe everyone access to you. You don't have to be everything to everyone. And when you finally understand that, when you truly live that, your life starts to change. Let me take you back to a season in my life where I was the yes man, the dependable one, the guy people called at midnight during crises, for rides, for emotional support, for favors I never agreed to until I did. I wore it like a badge. They count on me, I told myself. But slowly, I felt the cost. I was exhausted, short-tempered, falling behind on my own goals. My calendar was full, but none of it was my life. One night, after back-to-back calls helping others, I sat in the dark and realized something painful. I had become reliable to others, but unavailable to myself. That night, I wrote 3 words in my journal: protect your peace. That became my North Star. I started setting boundaries, not out of anger, not out of spite, but out of love for myself, for my time, for the life I wanted to live with intention. And let me tell you, it wasn't easy. The first time I said, "I can't help with that right now," the guilt came rushing in. The second time I turned off my phone at 9 p.m., I felt like I was breaking some invisible contract. But over time, the guilt turned into clarity, and the clarity turned into strength. Because here's what most people don't realize: saying no to others is often saying yes to your purpose. Setting limits with others is a way of setting your soul free. Stoicism doesn't tell you to abandon people. It tells you to be deliberate, to help when it serves both of you, to give from fullness, not from depletion, to choose where your energy goes, because where your energy goes, your life follows. And boundaries, they're not walls, they're gates. They don't shut people out. They let the right people in. You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. And when you draw the line clearly, when you say, "This is where I end," and you begin, you create space for mutual respect. One of the most powerful things you can say is, "I love you, but this drains me," or "I'm here for you, but not at the expense of my health," or simply, "Not right now." No explanation, no apology, just presence, strength, boundaries. Let me give you a simple phrase that changed my life. Whenever I feel overwhelmed or pressured, I ask myself, is this an act of love or a sacrifice of self? If it's the latter, I pause, I reevaluate, I choose differently. It doesn't make me cold, it makes me conscious. Because I've learned, if you don't protect your time, someone else will waste it for you. And if you don't honor your limits, the world will pretend you don't have any. So let this be your reminder. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to be unavailable. And you don't need to be burned out to prove that you care. True Stoic strength isn't found in saying yes to everything. It's found in knowing what deserves your yes. So, if your peace has been slipping, if your joy has been drowned out by everyone else's noise, take a step back, draw the line, and say to yourself with certainty and calm, this moment, this life, this energy, it's mine, and I choose to protect it. That's not selfish. That's wisdom. That's strength. That's Stoicism. Part 5. Freedom from approval. Detach from opinions and reclaim your life. There's a quiet prison that most people live inside and they don't even realize it. It's not made of steel bars or locked doors. It's made of fear. Fear of judgment. Fear of rejection. Fear of what others might think. We dress a certain way, speak a certain way, share certain opinions, and hold back others, not because they're untrue, but because we've been trained to survive through approval. But here's the Stoic truth. When you live for the opinions of others, you die to yourself. And the more you need their validation, the less you'll ever feel truly free. Let me ask you something. Have you ever hesitated before doing something brave just because you were worried about what people would say? Maybe you wanted to start a new business, share your writing, wear something bold, or finally speak your mind. But the thought crept in, what if they laugh? What if they don't get it? What if they think I'm foolish? And so you stayed quiet. You stayed safe. You stayed small. I've been there too many times, holding back my truth because I fear their misunderstanding. But here's what I've learned. People are going to judge you no matter what. Whether you speak or stay silent, whether you follow the crowd or go your own way. So why not be judged for living authentically? Why not be misunderstood for being honest? Why not build a life that makes you proud? Instead of chasing applause from people who don't live your life, carry your burdens or know your soul. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus said, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. That's not cynicism, that's freedom. Because the moment you no longer need everyone to get you, you stop shrinking to fit their narrow definitions. You expand, you breathe, you rise. Let me share a personal story. There was a time in my life when I wanted to leave a stable job to pursue something that felt more meaningful. It didn't make sense to others. It wasn't the safe or predictable path. People gave me the look. You know, the one half concern, half condescension. I felt the pressure to justify, to explain, to prove. But I didn't. I made the leap anyway. And it was hard, lonely even. But it was mine. And with each passing month, the weight of their opinions faded, and the strength of my own voice grew. Because once you start living in alignment with your truth, the approval of others becomes background noise. It's not that it doesn't sting sometimes. but it no longer defines you. Now, you might be wondering, how do I actually detach from what people think? It's one thing to say it, but how do I live it? Here's a practice that changed my life. When someone's opinion bothers you, pause. Ask yourself, why does this matter to me? Who gave this person the authority to define my worth? You'll find that most of the time, we've handed them power they never earned. Next, remind yourself their opinion is a reflection of their world, not mine. Their comment might come from jealousy, from fear, from misunderstanding, but it doesn't come from your core truth. And lastly, return to your values. Write them down if you have to. What do I believe in? What kind of life do I want to live? What kind of person do I want to be? Let those answers guide you, not the noise of the crowd. Because the truth is, the more you live by your own compass, the less you'll need theirs. And the more grounded you are in who you are, the more resilient you become in the face of criticism. Let's be clear, detaching from opinions doesn't mean you stop listening. Feedback is valuable when it's thoughtful, when it's rooted in care, when it helps you grow. But not every voice deserves a seat at your table, especially not the ones trying to dim your light because they're afraid of their own. So here's a question I ask myself often, and maybe it will help you too. Am I living for approval or for alignment? Because only one of those leads to peace. Only one of those leads to freedom. Only one of those helps you sleep at night with a quiet heart. You're not here to be everyone's favorite. You're here to be true. And when you stop chasing validation, when you stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you, when you stop shrinking every time someone raises an eyebrow, that's when you begin to live fully, boldly, unapologetically. That's when you become untouchable. That's when you become stoic. Part 6, the strength of silence, how stillness wins the fight. Have you ever been in one of those moments where your whole body tenses, your jaw tightens, your chest burns, and every part of you wants to react? Someone just disrespected you, said something cruel, mocked you, doubted you, challenged your character, your work, your dignity, and in that split second, you feel it, the fire, the urge to snap back, to defend, to prove. But what if you didn't? What if, just for a moment, you chose silence? Not the silence of defeat, not the silence of retreat, but the silence of power. The Stoics believed that silence wasn't weakness, it was mastery, because silence isn't the absence of a response, it's the presence of wisdom. Think about it. When someone's shouting, trying to bait you, trying to rattle you, they expect a reaction. They want your fire. But when you don't give it to them, when you stay calm, steady, still, you break the cycle. Because now, they're the only one yelling, they're the only one shaken, and your silence becomes a mirror reflecting their chaos back to them. I remember a time in my early career when a senior colleague publicly challenged my ideas during a meeting, not with curiosity, but with clear hostility. Everyone in the room turned to me, waiting for a comeback, and I wanted to give them one. I wanted to clap back, to prove him wrong, to win. But something deeper inside whispered, "Wait, don't, just listen." So I did. I nodded. I said, "Thanks for the feedback," and moved on. That night, I couldn't sleep. I wondered if I looked weak, if I lost respect. But the next day, several people came to me privately and said, "I admire how you handled that. You stayed professional. You didn't get dragged into it." That was the moment I learned not every battle needs to be fought out loud. Some of the greatest victories happen when you say nothing at all. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best answer to anger is silence, because anger is like a flame. It needs fuel. When you feed it, it grows. When you ignore it, it fades." Now, let's be clear. Silence isn't suppression. It's not bottling everything up and pretending nothing's wrong. It's choosing the right time, the right tone, and the right place, if any, to speak. Because when you act from stillness, not impulse, your words carry weight. They're not reactions. They're responses, measured, intentional, strong. Here's something I've come to believe. Anyone can raise their voice, but it takes real strength to lower it or to stay silent altogether. Try this the next time you're provoked. Pause. Take one deep breath. Ask yourself, will what I'm about to say bring peace or just more heat? If it's just heat, choose stillness, because silence is never empty. It's full of direction. It says, "You can't control me. You don't decide how I feel. You won't drag me down into your chaos." And more than anything, it says, "I know who I am. I don't need to prove it." I once heard a Buddhist monk say, "Speak only if it improves upon the silence." That's become a filter in my life. It doesn't mean I don't speak. It means I speak with purpose. And if I don't have something constructive, truthful, or kind to say, silence becomes my answer. Now, of course, people will misinterpret your silence. They'll say you're cold or arrogant or weak. Let them. They're not your responsibility. Your peace is, and when you protect that, when you no longer let every insult, every slight, every provocation dictate your behavior, you become untouchable. Not because you won every argument, but because you stopped needing to. So the next time someone crosses the line, remember this: you don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to fight to be strong. And you don't have to speak to show power. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is say nothing at all and walk away with your dignity, your calm, and your soul intact. That is true Stoic strength. Part 7, Dissolving Anger with Gratitude. The Stoic Path to Peace. Have you ever had one of those days where everything just seemed to go wrong? You overslept. You spilled coffee on your shirt. Someone cut you off in traffic. An email came in that ruined your mood. And by midday, you found yourself thinking, why does everything have to be so difficult? I've been there. We all have. It's in those moments when the frustration builds and the world feels like it's working against you that we face a choice. Do we spiral or do we shift? And here's where Stoicism gives us a gift most people never use: the power of gratitude. Now, I know what you're thinking. Gratitude sounds nice, sure, but in the middle of a bad day, when you're angry, tired, disappointed, yes, especially then. Because gratitude isn't just for sunny mornings or when things go your way. It's a weapon, a mental reset, a counterforce to every frustration and grievance that tries to take root in your mind. Marcus Aurelius, writing during war and plague, once said, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." He wasn't being poetic, he was being practical. Because when you shift your attention from what's lacking to what's present, from what's frustrating to what's still good, anger has nowhere to grow. It shrinks. It dissolves. Let me share a story. There was a time I was stuck in traffic, late for an important meeting. I was gripping the wheel, jaw clenched, swearing at the red lights and bumper-to-bumper madness. My heart was pounding. My mind was racing. And then, out of nowhere, this question dropped into my mind. What if this isn't a problem? What if it's a pause? So, I took a breath, turned down the radio, and instead of fuming, I started listing what I was grateful for. Not big things, small ones. I was grateful I had a car. Grateful I had a job worth showing up late for. Grateful the sun was shining. Grateful I had time to think. By the time I arrived, I wasn't frazzled. I was calm. That wasn't because the traffic changed. It was because I changed. And that's the beauty of gratitude. It doesn't require anything outside you to improve. It's an inner shift, a conscious choice to see clearly. Now, this isn't about toxic positivity. Gratitude doesn't mean pretending everything is fine when it's not. It means choosing to notice what is still okay, even when some things aren't. And in doing that, you take back power. Here's something I've practiced every night for years before bed. I write down 3 things I'm grateful for. Sometimes they're profound. Sometimes they're simple, warm socks, a good cup of tea, a kind smile. But no matter how rough the day was, I always find 3. And what that does over time is rewire the mind. You stop defaulting to complaint. You stop living in a state of lack. You start noticing beauty again in the mundane, the quiet, the overlooked. Epictetus once said, "He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has." It's not about ignoring pain. It's about not letting pain become your entire lens. Gratitude softens the edges of anger. It keeps you from reacting in ways you'll regret. It makes room for compassion, patience, even humor. Because when you're anchored in what's good, what's working, what you still have, you realize you're not as powerless as you feel. And from that place, you can respond, not react. So, the next time you feel the heat rise in your chest, Part 7, Dissolving Anger with Gratitude. The Stoic Path to Peace. Have you ever had one of those days where everything just seemed to go wrong? You overslept. You spilled coffee on your shirt. Someone cut you off in traffic. An email came in that ruined your mood. And by midday, you found yourself thinking, why does everything have to be so difficult? I've been there. We all have. It's in those moments when the frustration builds and the world feels like it's working against you that we face a choice. Do we spiral or do we shift? And here's where Stoicism gives us a gift. Most people never use the power of gratitude. Now, I know what you're thinking. Gratitude sounds nice, sure. But in the middle of a bad day, when you're angry, tired, disappointed, yes, especially then. Because gratitude isn't just for sunny mornings or when things go your way. It's a weapon, a mental reset, a counterforce to every frustration and grievance that tries to take root in your mind. Marcus Aurelius, writing during war and plague, once said, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." He wasn't being poetic, he was being practical. Because when you shift your attention from what's lacking to what's present, from what's frustrating to what's still good, anger has nowhere to grow. It shrinks. It dissolves. Let me share a story. There was a time I was stuck in traffic late for an important meeting. I was gripping the wheel, jaw clenched, swearing at the red lights and bumper-to-bumper madness. My heart was pounding. My mind was racing. And then, out of nowhere, this question dropped into my mind. What if this isn't a problem? What if it's a pause? So, I took a breath, turned down the radio, and instead of fuming, I started listing what I was grateful for. Not big things, small ones. I was grateful I had a car. Grateful I had a job worth showing up late for. Grateful the sun was shining. Grateful I had time to think. By the time I arrived, I wasn't frazzled. I was calm. That wasn't because the traffic changed. It was because I changed. And that's the beauty of gratitude. It doesn't require anything outside you to improve. It's an inner shift, a conscious choice to see clearly. Now, this isn't about toxic positivity. Gratitude doesn't mean pretending everything is fine when it's not. It means choosing to notice what is still okay, even when some things aren't. And in doing that, you take back power. Here's something I've practiced every night for years before bed. I write down 3 things I'm grateful for. Sometimes they're profound. Sometimes they're simple warm socks, a good cup of tea, a kind smile. But no matter how rough the day was, I always find 3 And what that does over time is rewire the mind. You stop defaulting to complaint. You stop living in a state of lack. You start noticing beauty again in the mundane, the quiet, the overlooked. Epictetus once said, "He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has." It's not about ignoring pain. It's about not letting pain become your entire lens. Gratitude softens the edges of anger. It keeps you from reacting in ways you'll regret. It makes room for compassion, patience, even humor. Because when you're anchored in what's good, what's working, what you still have, you realize you're not as powerless as you feel. And from that place, you can respond, not react. So, the next time you feel the heat rise in your chest, when the coffee spills, when the email stings, when someone cuts you off, pause, take one breath, and ask yourself, what is still good in this moment? It might be small, it might be silly, but it'll be enough to remind you that peace is still within reach. You don't need a perfect day to feel grateful. You just need a willing mind. And when you make that shift again and again, gratitude becomes not just a feeling, but a way of seeing. And anger, it simply can't breathe in that space, because you've replaced fire with focus, resentment with perspective, frustration with grace. That's how we dissolve anger, not by force, but by filling the space it once occupied with something stronger, with something still, with gratitude. Part 8, From Wounds to Wisdom. Turning criticism into growth. Let's be honest, criticism stings, even when it's meant to help, even when it's delivered gently, even when it's right. There's something about being told you're wrong, or you could have done better, or worse. That's not good enough. That cuts deeper than we expect. It touches our pride. It pokes our insecurity. It awakens the old, familiar fear of not being enough. And our instinct is usually to defend, deny, or shut down. But here's what the Stoics knew and what I've had to learn the hard way. Criticism, when filtered wisely, is one of life's greatest teachers. It shows us our blind spots. It challenges our assumptions. It keeps our ego in check. And most of all, it invites us to grow. The problem isn't criticism itself, it's how we receive it. Most people hear criticism and assume it's an attack. But what if you could learn to hear it as a mirror, not always flattering, not always clean, but honest, revealing, and often exactly what we need? I remember early in my career, I worked hard on a creative project, poured hours of thought and passion into it. I was proud. I presented it with excitement. And the feedback, it's okay, but it's missing depth, feels surface level. I nodded politely, but inside I was crushed. They don't get it, I told myself. They're being harsh. They don't see the work I put in. But when I calmed down, when I actually sat with their words, not defensively, But curiously, I saw something else. They were right. I had rushed parts of it. I avoided the harder emotional layers because they were uncomfortable. Their words weren't an insult. They were an invitation to go deeper. And when I did, the second version was better. Not just to them, but to me. That's the turning point. When we stop seeing criticism as a threat and start seeing it as fuel. Now, let's be clear. Not all criticism is useful. Some people criticize out of envy. Some out of ignorance. Some just like the sound of their own voice. So the first rule of Stoic response is this. Consider the source. Ask yourself, do they have my growth in mind? Are they speaking from experience or from ego? Does their opinion align with my values? If the answer is no, thank them in silence and move on. You don't need to carry every comment that lands at your feet. But if the answer is yes, or even maybe, then pause, reflect, and ask the golden Stoic question, what can I learn from this? That one question transforms wounds into wisdom. It turns a sting into a step forward. Because growth doesn't come from being praised. It comes from being challenged. It comes from looking at the parts of ourselves we'd rather avoid and choosing to refine them instead of deny them. Epictetus put it beautifully. If anyone tells you a person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses, but answer. He does not know my other faults, or he would not have mentioned only these. That's radical humility. That's owning your flaws with grace. And that's the kind of self-awareness that no insult can destroy. So, how do we practice this in real life? Here's a 3-step framework I use. Pause before you react. When someone critiques you, don't respond right away. Let the sting settle. Give yourself space to separate emotion from insight. Find the lesson. Even poorly delivered feedback might hold truth. Ask yourself, is there something useful here? Even if I don't like how it was said. Thank the mirror. Not every mirror flatters, but it reflects. And sometimes that's exactly what we need. Look, no one enjoys being corrected. But if your goal is to grow, not to impress, then you'll begin to welcome the discomfort. Because discomfort is where the growth lives. In the honest feedback, in the awkward truths, in the brave decision to face your imperfections and evolve. So the next time someone critiques your work, your words, or your way of thinking, don't flinch. Stand tall and ask yourself, what can I take from this? Even if it's just a grain of truth, even if it's just a reminder to stay humble. Because the strongest people aren't the ones who never get criticized. They're the ones who use it, refine through it, rise because of it. That's the Stoic way. You grow not in spite of critique, but because you were strong enough to receive it. And that's a kind of strength no applause can give. Part 9. The Art of Letting Go. Real strength is in release. There's a metaphor I once heard that I'll never forget. Imagine holding a burning coal in your hand, planning to throw it at someone who hurt you. But while you're waiting for the right moment, the coal is burning you. That's what resentment does. That's what anger, grudges, and emotional baggage do. They hurt the one who holds them most, and yet so many of us carry them. We replay the betrayal. We reimagine the argument. We hold on to what they did, what they said, what we wish we'd said back. And all the while, we're the ones who bleed. But Stoicism gives us another way, a higher road, a quieter power, the strength to let go. Now, letting go doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen. It doesn't mean excusing harm or forgetting the lesson. It means choosing not to let pain define you any longer. It means releasing the emotional hook that keeps you tied to the past so you can walk forward lighter, freer, stronger. I remember a time when someone I trusted deeply betrayed me. Their actions cut deeper than I imagined they could, and for months I held on to that wound, feeding it, guarding it, letting it shape how I saw the world, until one day I realized they weren't thinking about it anymore, but I was. I had built a prison out of their actions and then thrown away the key. That was the day I started letting go. Not all at once, not perfectly, but intentionally. And day by day, I reclaimed a little more of myself. Because here's the truth, letting go is not weakness. It is one of the bravest things you'll ever do. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do not be disturbed by what is outside your control. Let it go, and you will find peace." That's not resignation, that's wisdom. Because the past, you can't change it, but you can change your relationship to it. You can choose whether it haunts you or teaches you. And that choice makes all the difference. So how do we begin? How do we let go? Especially when the pain feels justified. Start here. First, acknowledge what you're holding on to. Call it by name. Anger, regret, betrayal, guilt. Don't hide it. Don't sugarcoat it. Be honest with yourself. Next, ask yourself if it's helping or hurting. Is this thought, this memory, this emotion moving you forward or keeping you stuck? If it's the latter, you already have your answer. Then take a breath and say out loud or silently, "I choose to release this, not because it didn't matter, but because I do." Repeat it as often as you need, because letting go is a practice, not a one-time event. And remember, it's not about letting them off the hook. It's about unhooking yourself. It's about choosing peace over punishment, healing over bitterness, freedom over control. Because when you let go, you make room for clarity, room for new joy, room for the version of you that isn't defined by pain, but by purpose. Think of it like setting down a heavy backpack you've been carrying for years. You didn't even realize how much it was slowing you down until you felt what it was like to walk without it. And suddenly, the path looks different, wider, brighter, possible. So today, ask yourself, What am I still holding on to that no longer serves me? And then take one small step toward setting it down. You don't have to forget. You don't have to forgive overnight. You just have to release little by little the need to keep bleeding over a wound that's ready to heal. That is real power. That is Stoicism in action. And when you finally let go of the grudge, of the need to be right, of the illusion of control, of what could have been, you don't become weaker. You become whole.